you so much for coming out. So, can everybody hear me okay? Yeah, okay. So my name is Cynthia Kaufman, and I am one of the founders of Pacificans for Higway1 Alternatives. We've been working for about a year and a half. A lot of us, you know, the Caltrans has had plans to widen the highway in Pacifica for a very long time, and you'll hear more about that later. And the plans have just been sort of slowly moving forward, and some of us felt like we needed to get ourselves together to actually proactively stop this thing so it wouldn't just sort of creep forward and happen. So we've been organizing, we've been doing a lot, and you're going to hear all about that tonight. So I think I don't want to say much more than that because we have a bunch of presentations to kind of explain this all to you systematically, and then we'll have plenty of time for questions and answers at the end. So, so with that, I'm just going to introduce our first speaker, is Leo Leone. And Leo was a member of the Planning Commission for a long time and has just done lots of great work here in Pacifica.
Thank you, Cynthia, for that nice introduction. Well, guess what? Normally you'd probably be listening to someone's own opinion tonight. I'm not going to give you any opinion. What I'm going to give you is a breakdown or an analysis of the work, part of the work our group's done, to try to understand what Caltrans has planned for Pacifica. And so everything you'll see that I present is actually Caltrans data, either in the environmental impact document or in the biological assessment. Now what I've done is found the information that conveniently is not easily available to members of the public, such as you and I. So that being said, we'll start here. This is the biological assessment document. It was prepared in 2010 down there. I might have skipped over it. This is actually the environmental impact report, the date of August 2013 on it. Now this is just an overview, big overview here. It's really hard, and I think I've been killing people with facts, so I came up with a new idea, concept I'm going to try out on you tonight. And the concept is this. When I tell you something is 300 feet long, or 900 feet long, or 1,200 feet long, I mean, that's a big number. But most of you, most Americans know what a football field is. So if I say, this is 300 feet long, well, you get an idea of what that is. But if I say this is a football field long, now you get a different perspective. And if I tell you this is a football field with a 10-foot wall on the side of it, or a 14-foot wall, or a 24-foot wall in front of it, then you get an idea not only of the length and size of something, but really the mass and bulk of it. So there may be a quiz, but I'm probably not going to do it, but I know the answer already, of course. How many football fields are we going to find tonight? I'll be coming back to this little kind of like insignificant looking thing, but it's really quite major. So we'll get back to that a little later. Here's the first slide. Many of you may recognize this, the Seabowl Lane. Here's Rockaway Beach Avenue. Here's Fassler. And what I want to point out quickly is right away we have 2 football field plus of retaining wall right here. And we have 1 football field of retaining wall right here by the Seabowl Lane. So I'm going to kind of just describe it that way instead of telling you, well, this is 630 feet. Say that's 2 football fields with a 10-foot wall underneath it facing the ocean. So anybody that's on the west side of the highway will definitely notice that. And coming up from the south, from Lindemar, you'll see a retaining wall here that's 310 feet wide, and will be up to 10 feet above as well. Just so you know, one of the other things besides going up is the highway goes sideways too. So over here, the highway, they don't give you specific information, but it is in the neighborhood of 40 feet wide at this point and 15 feet wide on the other side. So you have to add them up. So we're talking about 55 feet additional at this point right here. And there's some other things that I don't have time to get into, but we'll move on down or move up the road a little bit. And this area, we're going to be just talk shortly about Harvey Way. There's a retaining wall there that's just about 430 feet long. This one here contains the highway there. And as south of Rockaway, this whole area, we're going to be spending some time on this, but it moves 40 to 50 feet. And I won't get into the impacts right now, but I'll just tell you what they are in a little bit of time. Now this next one, this is probably our most complex section, okay? So I want to spend some time on this because it has 4 football fields of retaining wall on the ocean side, and it has 3 football fields of retaining wall on the east side. And it has that little insignificant thing I told you about, that's where this is, point A, cross-section. So this retaining wall that is over 900 feet long actually is 14 feet high into the side of the hill on the east side, just past the church and that area that you've seen has been for sale for quite a while. And then on the west side, 1,200 feet, running from San Marlo all the way to Reina del Mar, and another 10 foot high for anybody walking or hiking on the west side looking back across the highway. So this is really big. So 4 football fields in length, 10 feet high, and 3 football fields in length, 14 feet high. And this is where it really gets kind of convoluted, even for Caltrans. As they say, on one side of the road, on the east side, the highway widens up to 50 feet. And on the west side, the highway widens 50 to 70 feet, but they don't tell you exactly where. But if you add those 2 numbers up, it's pretty big, pretty wide, okay? And you just have to kind of figure it out. That's what the $4 million for the final design is, I guess, is where to place exactly how far these things are. So we'll just move on.
How wide is the existing road right now?
Okay, well, thank you for asking that, because here's the answer. Okay, the existing roadway is right here, and this is in scale, one to the other. This is the Caltrans drawing that I said was insignificant, but really insignificant, but really significant. Because right now the existing roadway is 64 feet wide. There's 2 lanes, the center median, which is really a 2 foot wide, a 2 foot high barrier. Then you have these little 5 foot shoulders, okay? So you total it up 64 feet, okay? Basic math. Now you go to what they call the preferred alternative, and it's 148 feet wide. So it's actually 84 feet wider, the existing road. And you can see, a lot of people, they write in the paper and they say things, well, it's only 2 lane, it's only 1 extra lane in each direction, it's only 2 lanes. What's the big deal? Well, you know, the lanes are going to be 12 feet wide, so 2 lanes at 12 feet would be 24 feet. We're talking about 84 feet extra going in here, including a landscape median that's 16 feet with 2 protector barriers on either side that make it 20 feet wide. And of all things, a landscape planter on the side beside a landscape planter there. This is important later on to me anyway, and I'll explain why in just a little bit. And here's an actual cross-section of that section A. So here's the existing hillside. You can see the 14-foot high retaining wall. And you can see where the existing road is. And you can see how much they're going to dig out and how high that's going to be. And on the 10-foot side, you can see the roadway is elevated because there's just too much slope there. They got to bring it up and fill it in and contain it. Okay, so that is a short explanation of what is there. Now, I want to talk a little bit just about Reina del Mar. We're getting just about to the end of our football field retaining walls, by the way. But before we get there, There's one right here that's almost a football field long, and it's 24 feet high, right there, north of Reina Del Mar on the west side, between Reina Del Mar and Morey Point Road. And you can see the roadway here, as they said, it widens about 65 feet. Well, you can see what that does, okay? It just makes for a really big, really wide intersection, okay? And there are actually two retaining walls that have not been described yet. There's one right here at the entrance to one of my favorite places in town, the Shell Dance Orchid Farm. There's a retaining wall there. And I'll show you another one in just a minute. The other retaining wall that's unspecified is right here at Old County Road. Now what they do is they make this so wide, so big, that they take away these businesses. As I said, it's somewhere between 50 and 70 feet, 60 feet in here. So you can see the businesses are gone, any parking on the highway is gone. They actually changed the entrance into Old County Road. It's one way in, San Marlo's one way in. And, you know, you can just tell there's going to be visual impacts because, you know, that kind of seaside feel entry sign that's on Highway 1, that's gone. The place where everybody puts their signs for all the events in town, be it political or fundraisers or anything else, that's all gone. So, you know, there's going to be impacts, obviously, to the businesses, employees, visitor serving type stuff. There's going to be parking gone on Old County Road because the Caltrans right-of-way is now going all the way to Old County Road right here. That's what the red is. It's the new Caltrans right-of-way. Okay? Oh, and I forgot to mention in the last slide, don't want to forget it, my house has been on the garden tour twice. I always go on the Pacifica garden tour. And one of the places that's on the garden tour is Mooney's Garden right there. And you can see right at the intersection, it is gone. And by the way, for 2 years, if Caltrans has its way, the place where they're going to park all their heavy equipment while this construction takes place, guess where it is? Right in that parking lot, right in there. So, I'm sorry, no, I'm on the wrong corner. It's right over here. It's this parking area, Mooney's Garden right there. So, you don't want to be confused about that. And here it is again, just so you can see the visual changes that take place. Here's the existing roadway. Here's the proposed roadway. These are Caltrans drawing now. This is not Leo having a glass of wine and saying, think I'll get loose and fast with the pen here. So, a couple of things I want to bring out. Believe it or not, this is what the final environmental impact report says. The footprint of the proposed highway widening has been minimized in order to reduce right-of-way acquisition and to avoid impacts to sensitive biological resources habitats. Now, can any sane person tell me, how can you minimize something and have things that don't even have anything to do with roadway? Capacity or movement, such as landscape medians, landscape planters, and so forth, that just add width and more construction and more cost onto something. And that's not even the end of that story, because the city of Pacifica, back in June of 2013, sent a letter to Caltrans saying, oh, we understand that the landscape median requires a design exception, that we have to request that before you can approve it and build it. And that's what Pacifica did. They asked for that landscape median. They asked for something that we don't even really need. And what even adds insult to me is that they also agree in this letter to bear the cost of the landscape median in perpetuity. Now, did we just go through hoops trying to get money for groups that are deserving in this city, and we're carrying on what I call, or I consider to be, unfunded liabilities now with landscape? How much does it cost to, I don't know, it's never been discussed. So I just want to put that out there. That's a city record document. It's a public record document. Okay? So I don't know about you, but I have a lot more I could say about this, and there's a lot of questions to be asked and answered, but we're going to hold off on that. And with that, I'm going to bring Peter Loeb and Cynthia back up in here. Thank you very much.
All right, and the next speaker is Peter Loeb, and he's gonna, yeah.
Did anybody total up the football fields? Okay, I'll give you the answer. It's 12 football fields of retaining walls.
So I just want to say that Peter was the mayor of Pacifica for quite a while. He was also on the Fog Fest board, and he's done a lot for this town, and he's been one of the real active members in this group.
Thank you. I think I'm supposed to talk a little bit about the history of this whole thing and the lawsuit that I and other people are currently involved in. But I wanted to speak after Leo because I'm going to refer to several of the things that Leo just mentioned. I started out as a child. No. I have several points I want to make. I'll try to be brief. But you're pointing at something. The 1980 general plan says that improvements to Highway 1 should not increase capacity, and there should be frontage roads on both sides of the highway. That was, for many, many years, that was the plan for what to do about Highway 1. I need to mention that currently we're in a general plan update process, which says that this thing, not that thing, what Caltrans is proposing is planned as part of the new general plan that is currently being reviewed, revised. Okay, in the 1980s, I was on the city council from 82 to 90. We went through a whole process to determine what kind of frontage road, what we were going to do about the highway and the intersections and everything else. And there were elaborate, many alternatives. And I think, I don't remember any of this, but people remind me that we selected what was called the 1E modified, which tells you gives you a sense of how many alternatives were looked at, because there was the 1 and the 2 and the 3, and then there was the 1 A, B, C, D, E, and then the 1E modified. None of those things ever happened, and it's hard to explain why not. Essentially, there wasn't support for moving forward with any of them. Along about the late 90s, I think, the idea of adding a lane on each side came to be. And somewhere like roughly in the 2000s somewhere, the Calera Parkway label got attached to that idea. And so for many years, that's about all it was the notion of we're going to add a lane on each side, and it's the Calera Parkway, but that's all that there was. When Caltrans came out with its draft EIR was really the first time that we all saw this thing that Leo was describing. Up until that, there really weren't any specifics about it. And, but all along, city staff had been participating in the project team that was developing that idea. Then it came out as the draft EIR. It had never been discussed before, the specifics of that. And that draft EIR went through a public comment process here in this room, run by Caltrans, not by the city. And then comes the final EIR, which Caltrans certifies it themselves. And in that is the extremely wide version, that Leo was describing. And as Leo pointed out, the city council voted for that without any input. They were never told by staff that it had financial implications, which Leo described. They also were never told that that wider alternative is going to severely impact the businesses on the east side. In fact, the pet hospital owners sent a letter saying that it would put them out of business because it would take away all of their front parking. But this was never, nobody ever said a word about any of this, and the city council said that's the one we want. Along the way, Pete DeJarnett was on the city council for many years and mayor several times. All along, he supported the idea of adding a lane. But since he's gone off the council and this thing came into being, he has publicly said he is opposed to that. That's never what anybody had in mind. That's my point. And so a whole bunch of us have been asking for public hearings from the city council. We want to address our city council about what our concerns are. And we've essentially been denied the entire time. They're not going to do that. Now their excuse is that there's a lawsuit about the final EIR. And I'm one of the participants in that lawsuit, so I want to say a couple words about that. But first, well, one of the things I want to say is that's a lame excuse because the city has a long history of having public hearings on development projects that are in litigation. There's no reason they can't hear from the public, and that's all we've been asking. Please just hear us. No, we can't do that until the lawsuit is resolved. Okay. Let me mention another lawsuit with Hal Bonner acting as my attorney. Hal's here somewhere. I, as the plaintiff, we sued saying that the Calera Parkway project is inconsistent with the 1980 general plan, which it is. It increases capacity, yada, yada, yada. That the court did not rule in our favor, but the court ruled very narrowly, as the court will always do. It'll try to find the thinnest slice, if you will. And what they said was that the lawsuit wasn't ripe because the city had not taken an action to approve this project. But they never ruled on the question of whether it was inconsistent with the general plan or not. Then one of the things that happened recently is the Planning Commission, as they do every year, approves the Capital Improvement Program, which includes the Calera Parkway project. And what they do as an action is essentially affirm that the Capital Improvement Program is consistent with the general plan. Well, because it has the Calera Parkway project in it, it's not. So a group of us appealed that to the city council. The city council heard that and they denied our appeal. And they approved the Capital Improvement Program as being consistent with the general plan, which is not true. It's factually not true, but they did it anyway. And that included that the denial of our appeal included a statement that the Calera Parkway project does not increase capacity. Well, I just ask you to use your common sense. Look at what Leo was showing you. Tell me that that does not increase capacity. The whole idea is it reduces traffic congestion by adding more, what? Capacity. Hello? Okay. So at the same time, there's a lawsuit that's currently going on. That's that group is called Pacificans for a Scenic Coast. There are several members of that group. Some of them are here. Some of them are willing to be named. Some people would rather not because of work considerations and other things like that. That lawsuit is really a lawsuit against Caltrans, saying that the final EIR is inadequate. It's inadequate on numerous grounds. The law that says you have to do a final EIR is the California Environmental Quality Act. And it lays out in specific terms what you have to do in the final EIR, and this one didn't do those things. I could go into more detail, but I don't want to bore you more than I already am. Celeste Langille and Brian Gaffney are attorneys in that lawsuit. They're acting pro bono. We're not being charged for that, but there are a number of costs that people have donated to cover. Had about $11,000 in costs so far that have to do with paralegal services and filing fees, and I don't want to get into the details of that too much. And the original complaint and the opening brief have been filed. We'll have a hearing on August 22nd. If you're interested in getting electronic copies of any of that stuff, give me your email address and I'll send it to you, because it's all public documents and you can see the case that we've laid out about all the many grounds on which the final EIR is inadequate. If we win that, and that's a big if, you can't predict what the courts will do. But if we won it outright, essentially the Caltrans would be required to redo the EIR. They have to go back out, look at the alternatives again. We're saying that they should evaluate a combination of alternatives, which they didn't do, and which the Coastal Commission told them to do specifically. They just ignored that and went ahead and did the final EIR without looking at combinations. Even if we win that lawsuit, though, we won't necessarily stop the project. We might delay it for some time while Caltrans regroups and redoes the EIR. We don't know. But that time will give us an opportunity to demonstrate a lot more public opposition and give us time to actually look at some more alternatives in depth, which somebody else is going to talk about, and maybe even get an independent traffic engineer to make some specific recommendations, evaluate what Caltrans is proposing, and talk about alternatives and how they might work. And I need to say this, that this lawsuit is very costly, as I mentioned, and we accept donations. We've had about 11,000 in donations so far, including 2,000 from the Sierra Club and another 1,000 promised by them as we ring up additional costs. So you can make checks payable to Pacifica's environmental family, because PSC as a group is the PEF, Pacifica's environmental family, is our fiscal sponsor. And you can, so you have to indicate for PSC on any check, and you can also go to the PEF website, and there's a donate button. Again, you have to indicate that it's for PSC, Pacificans for a Scenic Coast. I had to put that plug in, I'm sorry, because it's costing a lot of money. That's really all I wanted to say. And so, who's next?
Thanks, Peter. One last thing that, in making that plug, that Peter didn't say, so because we're under a fiscal sponsor, that means that all donations are tax deductible, just saying.
Oh, that's good.
That was the whole point of all that, I know. So, and in a couple minutes, we're going to have somebody talk about kind of our plan for stopping this. But before I get to that, I wanted we call ourselves Pacificans for Highway 1 Alternatives, and the idea is that there are a lot of people who think that traffic is a really serious problem in this town, and you can't just be against things if you're not for something. So one of the things that we've been asking the City Council is, could you please hire a traffic engineer to look into alternatives? Because we think that if you put a bunch of soft alternatives together, you could actually solve the traffic problem without all this concrete. And so that's what Pete Shoemaker said about.
All right, good evening. My name is Pete Shoemaker, and I am the chair of the Pacificans for Highway 1 Alternatives. I've been here 25 years, and like a lot of people, I came here from San Francisco, and as I drove down Pacifica for the first time with my new house, I made that curve around the ocean, and I went, ah. And we all know why we're here, and every day I do that, and I'm blessed by it. And I came right here right when we were in the middle of the tunnel battle. And that battle is very prescient about this one. It's a good model for this, because it was a model where Caltrans had an alternative. It was deadlock, stone cold lock. This is the only way to do it. You know how Caltrans works, right? They're going to blow off the top of Montana Mountain and change the weather patterns and dump all that stuff somewhere. It was a nightmare. And citizens at the last minute did an amazing job of stopping that thing and providing an alternative. And now, when Caltrans opened the tunnel, who was patting themselves on the back about how the tunnel was, right? So you see it does work. And what I'm so excited about being here in all these years is we talk about, environment and preservation and sustainability and all that sort of thing. But the challenge to change the mindset of our old economic system of pave, pave, pave. We got to keep paving, we got to keep growing. Everybody knows that can't continue at some point. If we have to learn how to stop to have an economic system without paving at some point, let's do it now while we still have some open spaces left. But to do that requires this kind of action. It's hard to say we can't make this work and make a city economic viable without continually paving and destroying things for future generations. And this is where the work takes in. And what we're doing here is not just fascinating and challenging and frustrating, but it's also very, very groundbreaking, because cities around the country are looking to us, and we have novel things to do here to make changes that can ripple out throughout. So if you want to make a difference, you make it here, and also you can set a pattern for other cities, other towns. Because if we can do it here, we can do it other places. So now that's the challenge here. Now the challenge is, okay, you've got Caltrans, who is a large, credible, so to speak, to a lot of people, agency, who proposes this thing, and now we've got citizens. We want alternatives. And we're intelligent people. We all have businesses. I have my expertise, you have yours, but we're not traffic engineers. How do you end up credibly going up against an agency with all these scientists telling you that these alternatives that they've looked at are not credible? That's the challenge, and the way to do that is like any other business, very methodically, very professionally, very thoroughly, and credibly. And so that's what we're trying to do. So let me just show you briefly the issue. Now the question is not, we don't have time or the need here to get into discussing which alternative might be better. Other people might think this is obvious, that's obvious. But the question is, how do we get them to consider others and a combination of others? So what's in the EIR here is basically a list of stuff that, again, you've probably heard about what they've done and why they have rejected it. So you can see here, right now the widening is basically from Reina Del Mar to Faster, and about 1,000 yards on each end. You can increase the capacity, and then you narrow it down. It goes from essentially 3 to 2 on each side as they merge in at speed. Now that bottleneck stuff is kind of obviously problematic, but they say that as the cars get through the lights, and you get all the cars through the lights so they're not stopped, and as they're moving, they will merge quicker and you'll have a better flow. Whether that's true or not, I mean, but again, we can laugh our heads and say, duh, but again, you're going up against an agency, and the city council has to go do due diligence, so how do we combat those? So this is so they said, can we do this any lesser? So this is what they said, we need to do this big plan, and anything else would be not work. So this is lesser widenings here, they said wouldn't do it right. we got to do the big one. Just around Miranda Del Mar intersection, same thing. They kind of toss these things out. Grade separation, that's basically 2 levels, right? So that, it can work. You pass one under, but also you can see how difficult that would be. There's also visual issues there. So that's what they said, it would be difficult, expensive, not enough room to do it. Again, roundabouts, you know what they are. Some places they work, some places they don't. Again, it's one of those things they considered, tossed it out. Frontage road on the west side, you can see these things, high right-of-way of costs. So again, this is just showing you that you can't say that Caltrans hasn't considered alternatives in their own minds that they have. We cannot just toss them off as unprofessional because there's a lot of expertise there, but they think in blinders, and that's really the key here. Okay, so increased transit service. This was kind of a joke. There's really no much transit service, particularly to the schools right now. So they didn't really do much on doing that. And that's one of the things that particularly Hal has been researching about, how they said they considered these alternatives but really didn't. So part of what we want to do with some extra help here is to try to really see, did you really consider these things and how, to what level? School bus service. Okay, well that's problematic. I mean, it'd be nice to have school buses. We all remember when we were younger and buses seemed to make a lot of sense, but a lot of times when you have solutions that require different money from different agencies, there's a whole lot of barriers that you have to overcome. So that's something to consider, and this was not, in their minds viable. And then movable cones or barriers. Again, sometimes those things, we've seen them on the Golden Gate Bridge sometimes, might not work. So, and a pedestrian overcrossing. Again, which is an issue. These things are problematic. They can work, but they've sort of fallen out of favor in the general traffic flow because of elderly people and danger if they're dark underneath. So it might work, but just one thing about that, they said the overcross wouldn't work. But right now it's cost, and I just timed this, let's see here, 35.3 seconds. I live in Valamar, so I stood there with my iPhone and I just timed that light, 35.3 seconds to cross that thing. Imagine if it was 2.3 times as wide. You're talking about a minute and a half almost of time that when somebody wants to walk their dog is going to stop that traffic, and that's going to increase the flow. So that kind of thing. And how can you make it across if you're elderly or bicycle or a young child? Issues there with safety and all that. So and there's also this signal timing, which we've also thought about. What's key here is that things evolve. Technology changes things. We get better ways of doing things in just about every way we're doing. Caltrans is looking at an old model in a lot of ways with older technology. One of the technologies they have was static signal timing. Basically, they study the traffic, they time the lights, and set them, and they run like that all week. It's like you're looking at your home and you figure, this is how when I go to work, so I'm going to set my thermostat for the entire week and just have a fixed program that's going to go on and off. Well, that can work sometimes, but basically you have a dynamic thermostat that adjusts on the fly. It's much more effective. What's happened now is that you have dynamic signal timing with new video technology that can actually read, analyze with a computer the traffic flow and adjust on the fly. And the lights are connected with each other and they can read each other. So that technology was fairly new. And it's a real game changer in certain areas, but it also could be very effective here. Now, you've heard, and that's been publicized by people for the project, that the engineers came down here and reported to the city council and said that they couldn't do anything. That was kind of a meeting that was kind of a setup by the city council to sort of blindside these engineers, and I won't talk more about that, but basically they said it cannot solve all the problem with the signal timing, but it can be a significant piece of the problem. So the idea that if you can't do it all with one solution, it's no good, that's the old mindset we're trying to get out of. Okay, so that's enough. The school start time also. Everybody knows, is there traffic problems nowadays this summer? No. Caltrans, somehow you just said the schools didn't exist. There's no problem there. We all know that. You drive here in the summer, there's no problem. So the source of the problem in the schools, you go to where the source is or you try to adjust that. So something about, you can see somehow if the schools could work with this, that's another piece of the problem with the signal timing with some other technologies. So my point is, again, not to discuss these things here. The engineer from that company actually said this, a piece of the solution, is to figure out how can we change this mindset. And the key thing about it here is this. The rules have changed. We've gotten smarter. California is more progressive. This whole idea that Caltrans, as a big corporation, has to justify its actions through certain standard criteria, according to certain metrics that they have to follow, legally binding, all that sort of thing. One of them was level of service, LOS, which is how, measured by certain flow, and that was their key metric. And that was pretty much the number one thing. Get the cars through as fast as possible. Don't think of anything else. And if that's their metric, then they have to run by that. Now we're realizing there's a whole, there's much more. There's an environment here. There's transit, and there's walkability, and there's other factors. So now the state has changed their guidelines in this bill S743 and said they cannot just use LOS, level of service, for their metrics. They need to consider others. And this is an absolute perfect bellwether test for that new. And I'm trying to think of that. Listen, we've had this project conceived in an old mindset. Now we've got a newer mindset that really encompasses all of the things we know intuitively about living here, that it's a whole environment that we need to think about. Now that the rules have changed, we need to rethink this project. And that's another powerful legal standing upon which we can sort of make our case and move ourselves forward and make the dialogue go. So that's, again, if the takeaway here is that you can't just consider Caltrans a bunch of buffoons. They're certainly not that. But they think in blinders. They think like when you're a hammer, the world looks like a nail, right? They're a hammer, they build. And so we've got to get them to move. We've got new marching orders to do that. We need more help to do it. And as part of that, there's a traffic engineer, Jim Misner, who lives in Pedro Point, who came in at our last forum up there and offered his services. He's seen as a top-notch traffic engineer. He has put out a scope of work. He's not the person who could do this. It's not his particular skill set. But he wrote out a scope of work for an engineer to do what we'd like to do. Assess these things, check the metrics, and do all that. Now we've got a sort of a ballpark. We're moving forward in this and trying to present this very professional way of proceeding to the city and saying, this is a scope of work for an engineer that we'd like you to hire. We're going to go look for grants. Anybody who's got connections to granting agencies that might fund an engineer, please talk to us. So what we want to do is come to the city with, here's the scope of work, here's the funding for it, hire the guy, have an independent consultant, let's take another look at this thing and really professionally consider these alternatives. That's what we're looking to do. And that's from my experience in work, and I've been at work a lot of times, that's how you get things done. You don't yell at people, call them names, and get emotional. You can't help it sometimes. But if you want to get stuff done, you do it in a professional, respectful, and thorough manner. And that's what we're all about here. So, again, that's sort of the piece of it. Again, I don't want to discuss different alternatives. We can always talk about that. But the key thing here is if you can help us find a granting agency, or talk to us. I know somebody here, somebody at this club, somebody at this Bay Area Air Quality Agency may have a grant that relates to this sort of thing or whatever. We'd love to have your help. Okay, good enough? Thanks.
All right, you can probably tell that we did not invite you here just to give you information. We invited you here because we wanted your help stopping this thing. So we had a forum like this a few months ago, and we really doubled our group. And so one of the fabulous people who came to join our group, who's now one of our core members, is Kaya Gordon, and she's going to talk about how you can get involved in our sort of our strategy for stopping this thing.
Hi. Thank you all very much for coming. This is exciting for us. I'm going to talk about next steps. So, putting together everything that you've heard. Okay. Thank you. I'm going to start with what are so this is a little bit of a summary and a little bit of speculation. What are the points at which the Calera Creek Parkway project can be stopped? The first thing that could happen, and this is highly unlikely, is that the City Council could not authorize the County Transit Authority to move forward with the project. That's the next step that we're expecting, but no one thinks that that's going to happen. There is some speculation that the City Council might not want to do that until after the election, because we think they're beginning to grasp that this is not a popular thing they have going. And I don't think anyone has mentioned in May we presented the city council at a city council meeting with 1,200 signatures of people who were opposed to this project. And we wanted them to know that there was a great deal of opposition in Pacifica and in the area. So they're on notice now in case they were ignoring that. Any other actions by the City Council against the project seem highly unlikely. The council had not really been saying what they felt about it, but we were definitely getting the idea that they were against it. There is one council member who seems to be against the widening and 4 that seem to be for it. That's what we thought, and it was mentioned, I think, by Peter that earlier in the month an appeal was brought against the council and the city, rather, including this project in the capital improvement program. And when they denied our appeal on that, the vote on that was 4-1. So that pretty much confirmed what we knew about what the council thinks. And that is a little helpful in terms of moving forward. Then there's the Coastal Commission. I think the Coastal Commission is a little bit of a wild card right now. In the past, they had said some encouraging things. There was something they said in 2012 in a letter that Caltrans should explore consolidating alternatives for the project that would use various measures to reduce traffic congestion while completely avoiding or substantially reducing impacts on coastal resources. But Caltrans did not. That was a letter in reference to Caltrans's actions. Caltrans completely ignored that with the environmental impact report that was spoken about earlier. And going back 10 years ago, there was a 2004 letter from the Coastal Commission to the City Planning Department that referred to the Calera Parkway project as inconsistent with the Coastal Act because it would result in the destruction of wetlands and environmentally sensitive habitat areas. At this point, Caltrans has made such gobbledygook out of that and used the sensitive environmental areas as a justification for cutting down some of the coastal hills, so we're certainly not counting on anything coming from that. And it sounds like the Coastal Commission is not as liberal as it has been in the past, and by the time it gets to them, if no one else has stopped the project, we don't think it's highly likely that they will. So we're certainly not going to wait for that to be the solution. And then there's the San Mateo County Transit Authority. They could, but it's pretty clear that they would not want to stop the project. And Peter Loeb also mentioned the Pacificans for Scenic Coast's lawsuit to reject the final environmental impact report and the consequence of if it managed to prevail in court, that would just set the clock back. That would be an advantage, but it's probably not going to be a solution. So, what are our options? And I don't want to give anyone the impression that we feel highly pessimistic about this, because we don't. And we have the success with the tunnel, even though Caltrans takes the credit for it. But that was a fantastic turnaround of a major plan of Caltrans's. So, it seems as though we are headed in the direction of forcing this to a vote. And that could come about pretty much in one of two ways. One way would be if we wrote legislation against the project and got the signatures for an initiative and put that on the ballot. There's a lot of technical aspects to that which we're currently researching. But we know that that is not an easy thing to do, and you have to get the wording of that exactly right. We've all seen these. You know, when you go to vote and some of these initiatives are worded so weirdly, well, we don't want to do that. In fact, our preference is probably not to do that at all. So the alternative would be a referendum. And if the City Council tells the County Transit Authority to go ahead with the next phase of the project, we would have 30 days to gather the necessary signatures. have them verified, go through that whole formal process, and that would result in a referendum being put on the next, well, it's a little unclear on the ballot in Pacifica whether it be the next general election or a special election. So we think we're headed in that direction. That is obviously going to take a huge amount of work, which segues me into what our overarching strategies are at this time. So one is to let the City Council know that if they authorize the Transit Authority to move ahead, they're going to get a public challenge in the way of a referendum, and we hope that that distresses them. We will also let the city know if they go forward with this, that they are probably going to be subject to more lawsuits. But in general, what we want to do, and here's where those of you who've come tonight for the first time come in, we need to generate a lot of publicity. We need to keep this issue out in the public. We need to kick up a lot of dust. We need to keep building popular support. It was great when we had people going out in the community and at the shopping centers and whatnot with the petition, because we talked to a lot of people. And most of the time that was a really positive experience. There are a few people who are convinced that this is a safety issue, which Caltrans actually states that it is not, but perhaps you've read some of their letters in the Pacifica Tribune. They seem fairly well organized, they're very vocal, and we want to present other viewpoints since that's incorrect. So we've been writing letters to the local papers and doing electronic, communication boards and all that kind of thing. We need to be ready to do a referendum, and if we have to do the referendum, we're going to have to get thousands of signatures in 30 days. So we need to get more people involved. And we want to keep communicating with the people of Pacifica about the alternatives, because we want to make sure that people know we are concerned about the traffic. It's not like we're just tossing off the traffic, but this is not the way to do it. This is not going to work. And there are ways that probably could work. So we need whatever you can offer. We need people to do graphic design. We need people to talk to our local politicians. We need people to go out and talk to their neighbors and help us continue to build up our email list. So, which we hope is going to get us to those people when we need to do a referendum, or if we need to do a referendum. So please let us know if you can volunteer your time. Don't feel that it has to be a huge commitment. We would welcome whatever you can do, and that would be great. So we have sign-up sheets at our table in the back, and our next general meeting is Thursday, July 24th at 7 p.m. at the Sharp Park Library. Anyone who wants to get involved is more than welcome to come. We're a very congenial group. So, building on the tunnel victory, all I can say is onward.
Questions afterwards, and we're almost done. We're almost done with the presentation part. So I know it's a long time. It's a long time to just sit and listen, but we have just one more quick presentation, and then on to the questions and comments and conversation. So I think Heidi did a really good job summarizing where we're at in our strategy, and I did want to say that another part of our strategy is to try to get somebody to win for the city council, and so that's something you're going to be hearing about in a second. And then also, John Keener is one of our newer members who spent a huge amount of time going door to door in Lindemar, and he has, I think, a very interesting perspective, because so many of us thought, well, there probably a lot of people in Lindemar really want the highway widened, so John's going to tell you what he found.
Well, I'm John Keener of Lindemar, and thanks for coming out tonight. I'm going to start by summarizing what's been said about the Caltrans plan to widen Highway 1, and this is the drawing of the project from the final environmental impact report, which Leo showed you earlier. So it's 1.3 miles long, adds 1 lane in each direction from the Sea Bowl, past the Rockaway intersection, past the Valamar intersection, down to Morey Point Road. There are merges from 3 lanes down to 2 out in front of the Sea Bowl, and again down at Morey Point Road. Up here is a cross-section of the roadway, and this is in red, this is the existing. Up here in black is the proposed plan. And the new roadway is double the width of the old one to add 2 lanes. That's because they've added features that aren't necessary to increase capacity, as you've heard. 16-foot median, shoulders, and so on. To give you an idea of how wide it is, at Rockaway, right here, it will extend almost all the way down to Old County Road. So that's quite a ways. The plan will necessitate cuts into the hillsides and retaining walls along the route. The cost is estimated at $55 million, with most of it coming from county funds. That's Measure A, which is our tax money. It's paid for by a sales tax surcharge. And the plan specifically says that it's not a safety improvement project, rather that it's intended to increase highway capacity. Next slide. John, tip the mic back up a little. Thanks. So, why is Caltrans' plan so objectionable? Well, reason number 1 is it won't work. It will not reduce traffic congestion. It causes merges from 3 lanes down to 2 at either end, and merges cause their own traffic jams. It also doesn't address the traffic lights, which are the real problem, especially at Valamar. And other Caltrans widening projects didn't work to reduce traffic congestion either. For example, Higway1 in Santa Cruz. Reason number 2, the Caltrans plan will cause years of construction delays. Highway 1 is the only way out for commuters from this end of town. And those construction delays are for a widening project that doesn't actually relieve traffic congestion. Number 3, it'll be less safe. Even longer pedestrian crossings at Valamar and Rockaway. The intersections will be much wider, and it'll be dangerous or less safe for school kids and other pedestrians. And 4, it'll be ugly, and that's my opinion. It's twice the width of the present highway, twice the concrete, and the plan will permanently scar our section of Pacifica. So, next one. So, some alternatives to the Caltrans plan for widening Highway 1. First, an independent assessment by a traffic consultant, obviously somebody not associated with Caltrans, followed by a combination of computerized video control of the traffic lights. That's just smart technology to adjust to real-time traffic conditions. Pedestrian overpasses or underpasses at the intersections, especially at Valamar, so that pedestrians, for example, school kids, are safer and traffic doesn't have to wait while they cross the highway. Ride-sharing programs in our schools. Instead of 1 parent and 1 child per car, let's try for 3 children per car. Modified school start times to spread out school traffic over time. And better transit service so that transit actually becomes a viable option to driving, which it currently isn't. So combinations of these alternatives and others were never seriously considered by Caltrans. We need more solutions, not more pavement. Now I'd like to read a letter that I wrote that was published in Pacifica Riptide, the San Mateo Daily Journal, and Pacifica Tribune to the editor. And we can have the slides off. There's a common misconception that the public is in favor of the Highway 1 widening plan between Rockaway and Valimar put forward by Caltrans. Residents of Lindemar bear the full effect of traffic on Highway 1 in the mornings and evenings, and would bear also the full bear the brunt of construction delays for years. My results from canvassing door to door refute the notion that Lindemar residents favor widening Highway 1. I knocked randomly on 1,100 doors in Lindemar in the order that they appeared on the streets. At about half the doors, somebody answered. Of the folks I talked to, 60% signed the petition to City Council asking it to hold hearings on alternatives to the widening. This was about a 4-to-1 margin over those in favor of widening. 4-to-1. The most frequent reason they gave for signing the petition was the merge from 3 lanes down to 2 in each direction that would occur at either end of the widening project. Comments like, "Are they, namely Caltrans, stupid?" were common. Caltrans has run roughshod over residents in Lindemar and other Pacific neighborhoods in both the draft and final environmental impact statements on the widening, finding without exception that the suggestions and objections put forward by citizens were without merit. City Council has not listened to pleas for public hearings on alternatives, choosing to hide behind excuses that it would have to wait for lawsuits to be settled. Council should hire a traffic consultant to do the job that Caltrans didn't do, exploring alternatives that are less damaging to Pacifica. So when will Lindemar and other Pacifica neighborhoods be heard? Signed, John Keener, Lindemar. Well, we presented the petitions to City Council, and we basically got no response beyond happy talk. Councilman Len Stone even had the audacity to say that once we heard the real facts behind the widening, we'd change our views. So when will the residents of Lindemar, Rockaway, Valimar, Pedro Point, and other Pacifica neighborhoods be heard? Well, that's why I'm running for City Council. I'm running for those folks who signed that petition and the ones whose doors I never got to. We've had no voice so far in this fight against Caltrans' misbegotten plan for Highway 1, but I hope to provide one. Candidates for City Council usually run on generalities, but I'm not a politician, and I'll give you specifics. First, I'm dead set against the widening of Highway 1. City Council hasn't listened to me, listened to us, including my opponents in this election, Len Stone and Mike O'Neill. Caltrans' plan to widen the highway won't work to reduce traffic congestion, but it will make commuting a nightmare for years while they build it. I support a combination of alternatives to reduce traffic congestion, such as the ones that have been mentioned earlier. I'm a green candidate, from opposing highway expansion to supporting appropriate land use in Pedro Point, to mitigating global warming effects all over Pacifica. My free time is spent walking the hills above San Pedro Park and our beaches. I will do all I can to protect our natural environment. The electoral defeats of the cell phone utility tax, and before that, the 1% sales tax, show that City Council is out of touch with voters and has lost our trust. And City Council also increased the sewer tax without sending it to the voters. It will take many years before trust in city government returns. I won't vote to raise taxes like Len Stone and Mike O'Neill did twice. Instead, to balance the city budget, I believe we should contract with the county sheriff for police services, saving more than $1.5 million a year. You can visit my website or Facebook page for more details of my stands on the issues. They're listed on the green flyer that's available in the table back there. It's conveniently located next to the cookies. In conclusion, the people of Pacifica are owed clear explanations. I will hold budget forums so that we know where our money is going. This should be a start toward transparency in city finances. I promise to end hidden backroom decision-making. I would very much appreciate your vote in November. Thank you.
I want to reiterate then that there's all kinds of levels. You can call your city council member, you can write a letter to the paper or to one of the blogs, you can get involved with us. We have lots of levels of involvement. We have different committees for sort of different kind of interest groups. You can go to the general plan meeting on Saturday. So there are lots and lots. You can get involved in John Keener's campaign. There's a table back there for that if you're interested in being involved in that. So there's a lot of different ways you can get involved, and we just want you to do whatever you can, because really it's going to take all of us being mobilized and raising our voices to stop this thing. So thank you so much for your good attention and for coming.